they were so different from my own.
It seems like it had a spell on you as well.
That's what it sounds like to me. It's both of you had your personalities affected in some way. It almost seems like you were in a form of, I don't know, denial, or numbed you to the fact of what was going on. But it definitely wasn't a natural reaction.
Yeah, it was. I was almost like blinded to the distinct danger that it was presenting.
But again, we said it presented to you quite differently than it did to Tony. So it kind of manipulated you. That's why, me working with demonologists, the first thing I'm going to think about when something comes to this point, I would be calling in a demonologist to at least get their opinion on it. Because the first thing, like Mark said, is they do present themselves as children, to manipulate you into believing that they are what they are.
To gain your trust.
Innocent,
yes.
Sure.
Gain your trust and to gain the control, the level of control that they need. The more you trust them, the more you let them in, the more you invite them in.
Exactly.
And there's that level of control that they search for, and then their free will.
Yeah.
And I think the whole reason for it presenting different was I really think it's an evil spirit there, and it if it couldn't have me kill her, I think it was really trying to tear us apart. And because I tell you, the fights we had, oh my God, I just couldn't fathom the fact. I'm like, you're seeing all this stuff being done. Why can't you? Are you blind?
Well, these things do feed off of emotional turmoil.
Yeah.
It's that energy, that negative emotions that they create. It's almost like they feed off of it, and that's what makes them stronger. They cause the discourse, and the ultimate goal is, of course, possession, and harm family members, and God knows what. Eventually, to try to even kill you. So it's a good thing you got out of there when you did.
Oh, believe me, we've learned so much. Because I did go back and investigate in the house because I'm the answer woman. I want answers. I want details. I want to understand the experiences, and ask the questions and get more answers. And so I did start going back. Tony avoided the house for about 10 years.
Well, I don't blame you there, Tony. I think I would too.
Yeah.
What did you find, Deborah?
What's that?
Did you find anything in your research back there?
Not really. We would have investigative groups come up and contact us and want to sit down and know about our experiences, and we'd show them pictures and we'd tell them the stories and we'd show them, the scars or the items that would have gotten burned or melted while we were there, and we would spend hours, and we got to be seemingly really close with all these people that were coming up, and they would say, well, if you guys come over and, investigate with us, you're more than welcome. And I always jumped at the chance. Tony was like, no, I've had my fill. I'm good. And so I'd go over. I had a camera get melted one time. We got some amazing EVP with some of the investigations. We worked with Frank's Box. There was a plethora of different things that I learned as, being like a guest investigator with so many various groups. And it really opened my eyes to the possibility of things.
Do you recall any of the EVPs that you caught? What they said?
I can remember working with Frank's Box with a group that went in 2004, and it was Frank's prototype. I'm not sure if you or your guests are aware of how that unit works, but it basically scans the AM dial, in just seconds it'll stay on each station. I mean, it snippets of noise, basically.
Fraction of a second, actually. I think it scans through every frequency, one frequency every like a tenth of a second.
Yeah. And so you don't actually get words from any of the stations that are broadcasting. You get snippets of words or energy that the stations are producing. And we held full-fledged conversations in that investigation with a male entity. And we were badgering him, asking him where the money was. We were asking him why he got ousted from office, because we thought we were talking to the Finney that was mayor at one time. We asked him about the liquor. We were pressing him for information. We were trying to get, the reaction from him. And at one point, probably an hour into, our badgering him, and it was just getting exciting. We were just getting, full sentences and arguments. And I can remember him saying, better stop, I know your husband.
Oh, boy.
Oh, that was a
red
threat.
flag. Red flag.
Yeah, my heart said, okay, I think I'm done. And, I'm worried that this thing is going to reach out. Tony's back home.
Right.
So we kind of closed things up, and we said, well, if anybody else wants to say anything, say it now, because, we're shutting down the equipment, and we'd like to say thank you and good night to you. And this little, I want to say it's female. Sometimes it's hard, if you listen to EVP, sometimes it's hard to tell if it's a small child, male or female. I want to say it was female, said in a very sweet voice, so unbelievably clearly, good night.
So there might have been multiple entities.
Yeah, there must have been, yeah.
Yeah, and there was. And over the course of time, investigators going in, because, we travel with our own spirits. We, some of the groups in there, I'm sure, have used Ouija boards. It's been called a bus station. We worked with a group closely out of Kansas City that has probably 100 names that have come through on EVP. And there's probably a good significant 20 individuals that you can recognize on EVP. And, so at this point, working with this group, when they presented their information, because they actually investigated for probably 3 months on several occasions before they even talked to us. They didn't want any outside influences from us when they went in. And the first couple of investigations were very quiet, rather nothing, and then they started getting tons of EVP. And what was presenting is that there was a lot of human spirit in the house. So when they came over to our house to, meet with us and discuss things and, our experiences and then what they had to present, Tony kind of took a step back and said, boy, it does really seem to be human spirit there. Maybe I'm wrong.
It actually started making me feel like Deb did, where I was thinking, maybe there is something in the house that needs help. And like an idiot, I fell for it. And not to mention, Deb would go over with these groups. Well, I started missing my wife because, they were investigating all the time. And you start thinking, well, was I causing this stuff to happen? What, And so I ended up eventually going over there to the house and doing some investigating with them.
And the first couple times he went over, he'd have a scratch, or he'd get a burn, or, just something very minimal. That group had already kind of determined that there was a female spirit in the house that was kind of the matriarch. And when he got a scratch, the one investigator who was very into the EVP would get up and walk out of the room, and you could hear her talking to her and say, Joanna, now you stop that. You stop harming Tony. He's not here to hurt you. And he wouldn't get any more scratches. We investigated for, probably another year. Mm-hmm. And he was able to stay almost the whole nights, without any incident.
Wow. Now, did anything else really bad happen to you when you were investigating there, Tony?
Yeah.
August 17th, 2007.
I'll never forget it. We had gone over earlier in the day to drop something off. At this time, we were already having things, what's the correct word for it? A port. And we'd had something show up here that I had saw in a dream I dreamed that I was in the Sallie house and saw this thing. So we thought, well, it must be these spirits wanting, they're more or less communicating with us. So we decided to take it over to the house and leave it there. And we went in, and it was earlier in the day, and we went in, the feeling was just real light, didn't...
We smudged in the house. I set a recorder up when we got there, set it up on the banister upstairs. We recorded, the whole hour that we were there. We took pictures. It was a good investigation. It was very light and airy. And then we left for dinner and came back probably 3 or 4 hours later. And just driving up to the house, the investigator that was with us had seen a dark shadow get up in the living room from a chair and either walk through the wall or walk into the kitchen through the doorway, but she couldn't quite tell. And walking up to the door, you just felt in trepidation. I can remember saying a prayer before we went in and, asking everybody, do we still want to do this? Because during that dinner hour break that we had taken, we had gotten a phone call from a friend of ours saying she was getting this psychic feeling that there was something not going to be good. She felt something bad was going to happen. Now, power of suggestion, is that why we saw what we saw and felt what we felt as we were walking up to the house? That's what we basically
thought.
That's what we basically thought, because nothing major bad had ever happened. He'd gone almost a year without any sort of an attack or anything. So we did go in, and walking into the house, it felt so totally different. It was heavy. It was thick. I my recorder on the table downstairs in the dining room, and we went upstairs to check on what we had left.
We hadn't been in there probably 10 minutes. We walked upstairs. One investigator went in one room. Deb and I went into the master bedroom. Deb was smudging over by the window. I was just walking around with the camera, just snapping pictures. And all of a sudden, I just got instantly, just sick, almost to the point where I thought I was going to pass out. So I'm just standing there, just trying to get my bearings, and that was basically the last thing I remembered until I woke up. I remember being hit with something, and it felt like I got hit by a truck.
And at that instant, I was smudging in a window in the same room with him, had started to turn my gaze towards him because he was talking about feeling sick, and I was going to check and see, are you still standing? And it wasn't just the corner of my eye. I almost had full, frontal vision of him. And his feet left the floor about a foot, and he was thrown about 4 feet back with such force and speed. It didn't kill him.
It dented the wall.
It dented the wall. He was actually thrown so hard, his steel-toed lace-up boots stood where he stood.
You were knocked out of your boots.
That's like being hit by a car.
My laced-up boots, they were left where I was standing, and I was probably a good 4 foot back. And I remember when I did come to, it felt like just 1,000 pounds on top of me. It had me by the shoulders, whatever it was, and I was struggling so hard to get up. I was so scared.
You could see the muscles in his neck trying to get up, and he wasn't moving. He was, and the other investigator in the other room had come around the corner, had thought one of us had slipped or something, came around the corner to check on us, saw Tony in this position, probably saw, my eyes bugging out of my head because of what I had just seen, and she had the presence of mind to invoke prayer and in the name of God, let him
release him.
And we chanted that for a while, and it probably, it seemed like a lifetime, I'm sure, to Tony.
It did.
But it finally released him probably after maybe 45, 50 seconds or so. And we got him up, we shimmied him out, we gathered his boots and him down the stairs and out of the house. We gathered what little equipment we had there, turned out the lights, and we got in the car. And we were so rattled, we didn't want to come home. Our children were a lot younger, but we didn't want them to see us in that state, so we drove to the riverfront and tried to settle ourselves. The riverfront's only like, a block away and 2 blocks up kind of a thing. So it didn't take us long to get there. And while we're sitting there, Tony's, he's feeling...
It just felt like a fire on me. I was just burning everywhere. And Deb said, she'd gotten used to, if you're burning, maybe you're being scratched. So she tasked me to lift my shirt, and I tell you,
it was there.
It looked like...
It looked like he'd been in with a lion.
I had so many, I think it was over 100.
Between the front and his back, there were over 100 scratches on him.
That's from head to toe.
Oh my God. So please tell me you did not.
I know. I was going to say, was this enough? Did you say, Uncle? That's it?